This podcast is presented by the Prince George's County Memorial Library System.
Hi, I'm Hawa.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Kelsey.
And this is our podcast, These Books Made Me. Today we're going to be talking about Alice in April by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. Friendly warning as always, this podcast contains spoilers. If you don't yet know what Elizabeth meant to say when she said, "Someday you'll get another one," proceed with caution. Also, this book contains discussions of mature topics, including sexuality, child abuse, and suicide. And this episode is rated T for Teen. We have a special guest here with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm a librarian with Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and I've worked here for almost 5 years. So to start us off, as always, with a discussion of what this book means to each of us, I'll go first for that. So I read these books when I was in middle school and early high school and just absolutely devoured them. My parents did a little bit of light censorship on what I read, but these were not on the radar at all. So I felt like I was getting away with something. Yeah, they were a big part of how I accessed conversations about changes in middle school, being curious about sex, just general middle school angst, all of that.
So each of us get to pick one book that we'll talk about. And this was the book that I picked for this season because it was life-changing for me. I totally agree with you, Teresa. It was the book that taught me what it means to be a grown-up, I felt what that resonated with the feelings I was having at the time about what I thought it might mean to be a grown-up. And I definitely felt like I was sneakily getting some inappropriate material or something. Reading back, it's not even that inappropriate, but at the time I was like, ooh.
I was pretty sure I had read this book, but now I think maybe I stopped the Alice series prior to this book and then just read the Wikipedia on what happened to Alice afterwards because it did not, once I was in it, I was like, okay, I don't remember any of this vividly. But then I remembered the state thing. Whatever chunk of Alice I read was middle schoolish. And yeah, that same sort of feeling of oh, hey, this is very relatable and this speaks to me on some level. And I don't know, it's kind of like the book version of 17 magazine or something.
Yes.
As always, it's your girl Hawa, the one who has never read most of these books growing up. So this is my first time reading it. But, I kind of wish I had a book like this to read growing up. Or, well, I guess it was there. I just didn't know about it. I wish I knew about it. I think it would have been really interesting to me.
All right. Well, let's give you a little plot summary, let you know what happens in this book. So Alice McKinley is about to turn 13. And according to her Aunt Sally, this means she's going to be woman of the house soon. Capital W, capital H. Now, Alice feels like she must add worries like cleaning out the heating ducts and mending her single father and girl-crazy brother Lester's torn clothes to her list, on top of the normal stressors like schoolwork and deciding what to put in the school time capsule. On top of all of this, boys at school have begun naming girls after states to represent their physical development, or lack thereof. When Alice tries to plan a surprise party for her father's 50th birthday with the help of her dad's quote-unquote special friend, her language arts teacher, things go wrong in every possible way. And when an unexpected and tragic event happens, Alice finds herself growing up in ways that put all her other worries in perspective.
Okay, so I did a little research on the author. I was very intrigued to find out about her because she is an older woman now. She's almost 90, and she continues to write. She's been writing at a breakneck pace for a long time, so I'm just fascinated by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. Phyllis Reynolds Naylor was born in small town Anderson, Indiana in 1933, so Great Depression. Her parents read aloud to her every night, and she credits this for her love of writing and storytelling. She began writing stories as a young girl and as a teen tried to sell her stories to popular magazines like Highlights and 17. But after receiving numerous rejections, she shelved her writing plans to take on secretarial work to support herself and her first husband, who suffered from severe mental illness, an experience she writes about in her book, Crazy Love. They ultimately divorced, and at the age of 30, she was finally able to graduate from American University. She had 2 children with her new husband, Rex Naylor, and decided to pursue writing full-time, seeing her first children's book, The Galloping Goat, published in 1965. Since then, Naylor has never stopped writing. She's published over 140 books. Phyllis Reynolds Naylor is perhaps best known for her Alice series, following a girl from the age of 11 to 60 over the course of over 25 books and multiple prequels, and for her Shiloh series about an abused beagle and the boy who rescues him. Reynolds Naylor has received an array of awards, including the Newbery Award for Shiloh. An avid blogger, she's maintained a blog dedicated to reader questions about the Alice books for multiple decades, and she continues to answer readers on her WordPress. She also continues to write books at the age of 89, still writing her first 2 drafts in longhand before typing them into her computer.
All right, let's jump in on our discussion. So we always like to start off with just thinking about kind of generally, how did we feel like these books have held up over the almost 30 years since they came out? I almost said 20, but the 90s were 30 years ago. What do you think?
I mean, there's definitely stuff that dates this particular book in the series, like the advice that Alice gets from her aunt who tells her that she needs to be the woman of the house now. Like even for when it was written in the 90s, that was pretty archaic advice to give out.
Yeah.
Even more so now. Like, I don't think anyone's aunt, I hope no one's aunt in this day and age would tell a 13-year-old that she needs to step up and be the woman of the house.
Right, that's my thing. Like, she's 13 and she's like, yeah, you need to deal with, and some of the stuff that she was listing was like, yeah, you gotta rake the leaves and clean out the gutters and do all this. I don't
like why is she doing all the home maintenance?
Then what was it the furnace company that called? And she's like, yeah, hold on. I thought she was just gonna take her dad's checkbook and write the check. So I'm glad she asked him.
Or the distillated fibrillator.
That was Lester, though. That was pretty good. That totally reminded me, like, so Lester calls and pretends to be like a service repair sort of place. It's like, ma'am, you're gonna have like major problems if you don't take care of this right away. And like, you can hear her like starting to panic because he says this, and then at some point,
$10,000.
When he says how much it costs, she realizes that he's pranking her. But it totally reminds me of my friend that used to call Old Navy when I worked there and like say like, I'm having a denim emergency. I need to talk to the denim expert. And they'd always transfer it to me. Like, I don't know. Prank calls were a great thing. It dates the book, but like, I'm kind of sad that like cell phones have made prank calls pretty like not a thing now because you can tell who's calling.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked a little bit about like just thinking about it feeling dated. The pop culture references went out of date pretty quick. I mean, what's interesting is we've discovered that it has been updated. So did anyone find the original list of...
Yeah, let me get to it real quick in the book.
The most obvious spot is in the book when she's listing the things that she wants to put in the time capsule.
In the edition that we have, which I think was 85, 95, but it was the 93 was the copyright on it, right? The things she wanted were a Washington Post newspaper article about the old Soviet Union, Michael Jordan poster, cassette of OPP, some Nike Air Jordans campaign literature about county elections, a Say No to Drugs bumper sticker, a video cassette of Robin Hood, a McDonald's Big Mac wrapper, a Jane Fonda exercise tape, and earrings for pierced ears. And actually, that is slightly different than another edition from around the same time that I had that had changed it to a Michael Jackson poster.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Maybe they felt the Jordans and the Michael Jordan poster were redundant.
Yeah, maybe.
So my copy that was the 2011 edition says that her 10 things were a Washington Post newspaper article about global warming, a Harry Potter poster, which I think in 2011, I think one of the last movies had came out. Only know that because I worked at a movie theater back then. I
know that because I had to miss the premiere night because I went to my college orientation and I was devastated.
Sounds very responsible. A DVD of Lord of the Rings, some Ugg boots, campaign literature about the county elections, Montgomery County elections, I'm guessing. A Say No to Drugs bumper sticker, a big McDonald's Big Mac wrapper, an LED flashlight, someone's old iPod, and a silly band. A silly, like the little bracelets that were shaped like animals.
I feel like that's very of the time.
Yeah.
That the LED flashlight, though. What?
That's odd.
That's really specific.
I like that she kept the county elections literature in for both.
And the Big Mac wrapper.
She really wanted to make sure.
My favorite thing on this list is probably the iPod.
Yeah.
Because my iPod Classic to me, I think I stopped using my iPod officially like in 2014 and I was very sad that I lost it. But yeah, no, my iPod Classic held me down.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't holding anybody down in 93 when the book first came out, but whatever.
The iPod Classic was the best because you could wash it by accident like 10 times, and it was like a tank. It would still make it through. The backlight just died on mine. That was it. The other thing that I think we talked about that was a little weird is the line when she's describing her dad's birthday party. And we've checked, this is still in the 2011 edition. She says, it was the most awful party that had taken place in Maryland since the Civil War. I feel like I'm that meme of the woman with like the question marks around her face. Like, I don't know what that means, and it feels offensive.
Yeah, like Civil War was not a party.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, would a kid reading this get what that's supposed to mean? Like,
I mean,
we don't
as
even
an
get what it
adult,
means.
we don't get it. So I'm not even, I don't
Very
know.
strange.
I feel like to her that was a funny joke, but it did not land with literally any other human being, because what does it mean?
I feel like she's just using the Civil War to describe like a time, like literally like it's just the worst party that happened in the past 200 years. But like it was just a weird marker to pick. Like, strange.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So she's just saying like in that amount of time,
Yes.
no worse party has. Wow.
But
Okay.
don't pick the
That's
Civil
bizarre
War.
phrasing for that. I can't even get it even when Kelsey explains it to me 3 times. Wow.
It somehow got through multiple editors, though. So
And then the last thing that I would just highlight is that I think the teacher, Miss Summers, Alice relationship is something that comes across a little dated now in a less obvious way. You just wouldn't take a kid to your house if you were their teacher.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't have a relationship with their dad. And if you did, you probably wouldn't have them in your class anymore. The dynamic is there's nothing inappropriate suggested, but you just would not do that today.
Yeah. I feel like it's something that you used to kind of see on TV a lot.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about her family a little bit more. What do we think about her dad, Ben?
I mean, he's really loving. He, I think, tries really hard to be supportive. You know, he seems pretty unflappable with most of this stuff. I like that he doesn't have the sort of stereotypical guy reaction to like, oh no, periods kind of thing, or la 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 with his fingers in his ears when she's trying to talk about like body changes. They seem to have a pretty healthy, frank discussion about puberty and boys and girls. And it seems refreshing to see a father-daughter relationship that isn't colored by this sort of sitcom-y trope of like, I can't see pink, I'm a guy. There's none of that. So that's good. But at the same time, he just doesn't notice that she's trying to take on like all of these home responsibilities and she's putting all this pressure on herself. So that's not great. So kind of mixed.
I like that he's not like the hapless widow trope either. It's not like he's like, oh, my wife died and now I don't know what to do. He says that he learned how to mend clothes when his wife died, and it's not, Alice never noticed. So it's not like his dad was like, we're in chaos and I don't know what I'm doing. He just kind of quietly taught himself and figured it out, and she didn't really notice a difference.
except for the housework that Alice puts on herself in this book, like a lot of the duties are split very evenly through the family. Like they take turns cooking, even though Alice is not a good cook, but like, but it also says something that like her dad gives her that responsibility, but also, you know, is taking it on himself, and Lester's taking it on himself too. Yeah, I like that dynamic of just like a shared responsibility for the home until Aunt Sally steps in.
I'm like that she has the part-time job at his
music store.
work. You know, he manages the music store and she does a few hours there on a Saturday. I thought that was nice. He seems to work a lot. And so like a way to spend time with this kid while actually like giving her some responsibilities and pocket money. And I thought that was a nice thing about their relationship.
Yeah, they seem
as
like they
well.
have a really good relationship. I don't know if this is something that was covered in one of the other books, but I think that they said not too long after the mom died, they went to go live with the aunt. She went to go live with the aunt for a little bit. Do you know if there was ever a reason for that, or?
I thought it made it sound like Aunt Sally kind of moved herself in to take care of them.
Oh, okay.
Like that she felt like, oh, well, now there's no woman in the house and like they're going to fall to pieces without. I mean, she seems like kind of a busybody anyway. So it seemed like she came to help, but that just turned into her taking over everything for some period of time. And that's like why there's all the confusion about where
who did what.
Alice isn't sure if it was her mom or if it was Aunt Sally because she was really little and, you know, who was more present then.
What about Lester?
I think Lester is really interesting. I like that he has this close relationship with his sister despite there being such an age range. I think it's also really funny that he has all these girlfriends and that his sister just is in the know about all of them. Because, I mean, I guess she's like 12, so I'm just surprised that she's so in the know. Like, not even just the fact that, okay, I have one girlfriend that I have all these people that I'm back and forth in between, and all my drama with them, and I think it's cute.
Yeah, to the point that she like calls them and invites them to the birthday party and asks them for life advice. They're just part of her world.
I do love Alice's relationship with, I think it's Marilyn and Carol.
And Crystal.
Crystal, yeah. How in one of the earlier books, like the core angst of that book is she's trying to find a sense of sisterhood with other women in her life because she doesn't have a mother. And Marilyn and Crystal are like two of the people that she turns to for that. So she's got this like really sweet, supportive relationship, even though they, at this point, hate her brother so much.
But, like, not enough, because everything in here, Lester's like, well, then I gave her a rose and everything was cool. Like,
oh my God.
A rose? He's getting off so cheap for, like, being a total cad with these poor girls. I also totally pictured Lester as the Matthew McConaughey character from Dazed and Confused. I felt like that was the vibe he had, because she said at one point he has the mustache. And
Yes.
I always picture his mustache being like very sparse.
And
he's also like just 20.
He shows up to the party late just for him to show up with another girl that we hadn't even heard of in this book until then.
Yeah, that was like girl 3.
Joy. And then two of them knew each other and they just talked in the corner the whole time. And then Sis was mad because she felt like he was making eyes at the other girls.
Well, and then the other girl, so the non-Joy third girl, I can't remember if it was Crystal or Marilyn, got like stuck with the woman from her dad's work that no one wants to be around for the
Loretta,
whole party.
Loretta, is that her name?
Yeah, and they tried to figure out how to like uninvite her, and then the etiquette book was just like, honestly, you
Cancel
can't.
the party.
Cancel the party.
Oh my God. And then what do we think about the idea that her mom isn't in the picture? Like, how do we feel like that does or doesn't really show up in this book, or how they handle that dynamic?
I thought it was interesting. I think the fact that she has such a good relationship with her dad and her brother makes it different than maybe other stories. I mean, it's not my experience, but I think that it's interesting that they have such a close relationship so where she can ask questions that she may have initially maybe wanted to ask her mom. I mean, I'm sure she still feels that loss because, there's a part where she talks about, her friends often forget that she doesn't have a mom.
Mm-hmm.
But with Denise notices because Denise has this terrible relationship with her mom. I thought that was interesting.
I liked that it came up multiple times that she couldn't remember if it was her mom or Aunt Sally in a memory that she had, because I think that was a really, maybe not unique, but it's definitely not the normal way that loss is looked at in children's literature, where often it feels like the person who's gone is held up as this sort of icon to the person that lost. And that's not here. Like, this seems like a much more authentic picture of what loss would be like. If you lost your mom when you were 4, you would have very few memories by this age, and they would be fuzzy. And so the experience she has of trying to deal with that, like, you do feel some grief from Alice about that, more so even than grief about her mom. It's the loss of the notion of her mom upsets her, and that comes up repeatedly. The loss of her mom is present in her life every day, but not in a like, it's devastating, I'm going to go cry on my
She's
bed.
Like healthfully
it's just like
adjusted
she's
to this
aware of it.
grief. Yeah.
That would make you stick out as a kid that age. She's probably the only person she knows that does not have a mother. Not having a dad is very different. Lots of people have single mothers raising them. Lots of people may have a dad that's sort of sporadically in the picture, but most kids aren't missing their mom. And so for her, that probably is a source of self-consciousness. I thought it was a really nuanced way of looking at the loss of a parent that wasn't so, sentimental as often children. It wasn't as maudlin.
Yeah.
In agreement with what you were saying, just that like it's the absence of like a model for Alice. Like, she's constantly looking for examples of what it means to be a girl becoming a woman. And she always has to look outside of her own home for that. So she's looking to her teacher and putting that pressure on her dad's relationship with her teacher as part of that. She's, reaching out to Aunt Sally for advice, reaching out to the women in Lester's life. It's, less of a personal mourning and more just needing some kind of model to follow.
Yeah.
Then there's the one part where she has a memory that comes to mind, and I think it was a piece of advice she gave her friend, and she's like, where did I get that from? And then she's like, oh, I think that was something that my mom told me. And she's just really like recognizing that that's a memory that she has, and she was so excited about that memory coming back to her. So that was, I think, because it was like, well, she doesn't necessarily remember everything, but the feeling that she got when she had that one memory come back to her was kind of touching.
I think I really felt her grief when she was making the cake with her teacher.
Yeah.
And she had that conversation with her aunt, like, oh, it's weird to have someone else make your mom's special cake recipe that was your dad's favorite, but like it's good for him, but like it just feels weird. And she's in the house making it with her, and she's like, I just want to ask her to be my mom.
Aww.
Your heart breaks a little bit for her there, because you totally understand why she would want that. And she has this person who kind of is stepping into that in a little bit for her. But
I was so mad at Aunt Sally about that, by the way, when she was like, that's really weird for you guys to make your mom's cake with this other woman, and kind of guilting her. I thought Alice's comeback, which was, how am I going to forget her if I'm using her recipe book with her name on it and her writing? It was a great comeback to that. But if you're a flippin' adult lady, like, why are you putting this on a kid? Like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Alice keeps reaching out to Aunt Sally, because I mean, like, if it was
She's
just
the worst.
if Aunt Sally was like the only woman in her family, that would make sense. But Aunt Sally has a daughter who's a little bit older than Lester, who Alice could be calling for advice. I don't know why she's not calling her.
She mentions her. Carol, is that her name?
I think so, yeah. Carol is in some of the earlier books, and she gives really good advice. Like, I don't know why she's not calling her.
Yeah, that's rough. And one other thing that was in this that, again, I just thought was a really non-stereotypical look at loss of a parent. Of course you would miss things like making a cake, like cooking together, and those types of things that are sort of seen as the obvious mother-daughter bonding activities, the mending, things like that. But I thought it was really interesting. There's a scene where she's in school and she's looking at Miss Summers, who is her, like, I wish she could be my mom, the lady that's dating her dad. She's looking at her figure and thinking about, like, how beautiful she is. She's basically like, I hope my boobs are like hers when I grow up. She has perfect boobs. But then she's, I think, at dinner with her dad, and she's wondering, most girls can look at their mom and say, like, well, I kind of look like my mom. When I grow up, I might look like her. She doesn't have that. And so she's kind of circling around this, like, did mom have good boobs question, which she does eventually get to. But
and he's like, yes, just eat your peas.
Yeah, what's fine. Like, that was a fine response. But like, missing something like that, I thought that was a really good piece of writing, because that is the kind of weird specificity of thing you lose. And those are the things that get you about missing somebody. It's the weird thing, right? And so, like, not having that seemed like a really nice illustration of how much you lose when you don't have your mom in your life anymore.
I guess to just kind of round out thinking about the kind of main characters we had some questions about, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the Patrick-Alice dynamic and how awkward we found it.
He's a sweet guy.
Yeah, poor
Nice
Patrick.
boy.
She's like, yeah, what state am I? Please help me. Like, tell them to give me a state. And doesn't he say he picked Maine because he liked the fishing there?
He went float fishing.
He had a nice trip there with his family, so he associated her with something that was beautiful to him, and then she got all mad about it.
He's like the only guy not sexually harassing the entire school, and
she's mad about it.
Yeah, poor Patrick. He reminded me a lot of Sport from Harriet the Spy, where it's like, this kid is so mature and seems, just really a lot more together than anyone else his age that's represented in the book. And then she just is kind of a jerk to him at times in the book, where it's like, he came and like cooked this whole gourmet dinner for your dad. And
I know. And they trust him so much that literally they're like, oh yeah, the furnace people are coming. You and Patrick just stay in the house by yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I felt weird for Patrick because, Teresa, you explained, and I kind of remember this, that they dated briefly and then they kind of broke it off. And you can just feel that they're in this like middle space between friendship and something else. And it's like her special friend. Dad has a special friend. She is a special friend. Strange.
I think, like, they don't go into this a whole lot in this book, but I do think in her mind she's gonna get back to him.
Yeah.
Like, she does care about him a lot. And the way they ended things was just her saying, I'm not ready for this right now, but I don't want to just toss you aside either.
All right, let's get into the juicy bits.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of talked about how for those of us who read it as a kid, this really was like a introduction into thinking about bodies and puberty and what it means to grow up. How did we kind of find that piece of it coming back to it?
There was less of it in this particular book than I remembered. It definitely amps up as the series goes along, but I mean, this book's been banned for it, so it's definitely there, but you know, guys at school making a big deal about it too. But like, I mean, as far as curiosity about sex goes, it's really not that extreme.
Yeah, it's tame, like all things considered. But at the same time, it's still more substantial than Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret was. It's also a lot healthier than that book was, which still had a whole lot of external shaming going on and a whole lot of anxiety about everything going on. Yes, there's anxiety about who's, developed first and who the boys think is Wyoming.
Mountainous.
But generally, the body questions, the body anxiety, it's present throughout the whole book. Like it really is a through line in the book, but it's a pretty healthy and accurate depiction of it. I think we're like, you are kind of obsessed with it at that age because like there's all kinds of stuff going on with you, and you are looking at the other girls in the locker room and in either direction wanting the thing you don't have. I think the boys are obsessed with it at that age to the point that it does become harassment. Everybody dealt with getting their bra strap snapped or something that should not have been okay. And it certainly would be accurate for the time that the boys were just unchecked talking about everybody's boobs. Like,
yeah, it's just like an eye roll kind of thing rather than.
Which is why, like, I think it's funny when books get banned for content like this, especially when they say things like that it's not age appropriate, because I'm just like, yo, have you met middle schoolers? Like, they're absolutely doing all these things in the book and probably using way worse language.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I know kids were cussing in middle school. Like,
which is why I don't get that when people, I know like I'm preaching to the choir here, but like I don't get when people don't want that to be in the book, because I'd rather it be there and like have some healthy portrayals of like, wow, this is how it's stressing out the girls for you to talk like this or think like this. Like maybe I could rethink my actions, or like I'm a girl experiencing this and like I can see it's relatable that, I would feel this way about it,
Or even seeing it happening to the characters gives you enough distance to be like, wait, that's not okay. But that would stress me out too. And then thinking about your own life. Well, hey, that's not really okay when the boys do this thing to me.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
or you can get some good comebacks. No, I'm kidding.
True. So we should talk about that comeback, because I will say when I got to that part of the book, I was like, dang, Phyllis Reynolds Naylor just went there with a testicle burn. Like, she just out of nowhere is like, we're just going to drop this little insult about an undescended testicle, and there we go. It was like, okay. We went there.
She dropped the I can't do it.
I'll do it. She dropped that joke like an undescended testicle.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is I very distinctly remember that joke, but I did not remember that it was in this book. I don't know where I thought I got it from, but when I read it, I was like, oh, that's been in my head for a long time. That goes all the way back.
Me too. And that joke never left my head.
And I like that we didn't talk about this with Lester, but like, not only is she comfortable talking to her dad about this stuff, but she can ask Lester about it too. And he doesn't make her feel weird either.
No,
so
he just gave her that sick burn.
He's like,
and then explains it. No, I think the dad explains it to her.
Yeah, he has to explain it after Lester's just like, you want to wreck the guy? Go with this.
Yeah. And then Elizabeth says
has
it.
No idea what they're talking about.
Someday, what did she say? Someday you'll get
Someday
another
you'll
one.
Get another one.
and then Alice has to explain to her what she just said, and she's like devastated.
I love that when Alice tells Lester what Elizabeth actually said and how she like messed it up, and Lester thinks it's hilarious, and he's like, that's so much worse, because now he's going to be wondering what he's going to get. Like, what other one? What is he missing?
So isn't Elizabeth the one that's like freaked out that her mom's pregnant because like she's like, then people won't know that she was having sex?
But like, didn't you have like a friend like that at some point who was just like kind of simpler with everything. Like, they really thought that like you could tell how many times that married couple had sex because they had like 4 kids. So they must have done it 4 times because God knows you wouldn't do it more than you have to. And that's like totally Elizabeth's like viewpoint on the part where she tells her, even the Pope's parents did it, Elizabeth. And she's like, oh, well, you've given me a lot to think about. I guess it's okay.
And now she's like, maybe I'll have like 1 kid just to see what... She's like, maybe I'll get married. Maybe I'll have 1 kid just to see what it's like. So, okay, cool. You're going to have sex once.
The kid could be the next pope. You know?
And Elizabeth's so like proactively concerned about all of these things. Like she's very worried about vomiting in front of a spouse someday. Or like
that was a funny conversation in general where they're like, she doesn't, what were they saying? Like they wouldn't ask their husband to go get a Kotex. And she's like, but what if you have to shop for a jock strap for him? And I just think it's funny that they couldn't think of like an equivalent. So they're like, a jock strap, like you buy all the time.
And then they were embarrassed to say, they were like, okay, well, what type of tampon do you need? She's like, Super Plus. Like, ma'am, if that's what you need, that's what you need.
Oh, bless Elizabeth's heart. In one of the earlier books, this is another great example of how Alice's dad is just like cool with this stuff and really supportive of like bodies in a healthy way. Elizabeth's super anxious about how she's never seen a boy naked. And Alice is like going through National Geographic magazines trying to like find some stuff for Elizabeth to look at. And her dad sees her with all these pages like bookmarked. And he's like, okay, you know what? We're just going to go to the library and get a medical encyclopedia and you can give this to Elizabeth. And it was just like a really supportive moment. Like, like no shame about it, just acknowledging this curiosity and giving like a healthy way to approach it.
Well, he really seems to get Elizabeth too, because in this book, he like tells Alice, you know, sometimes totally normal people have a kid that's just freaked out about everything. It happens.
My favorite thing about Elizabeth is like the way they introduce her in this book is like you come into her house and there's just a giant picture of her praying. Like,
I had a sleepover at someone's house like that. I have a very clear picture in my mind.
It really sets you up to really understand who she is as a person.
I feel like her parents didn't realize just what they were doing to her either. With like she's been getting all this messaging about bodies and stuff from her own mom, and then her mom gets pregnant. She's like, how could you, who's like made me feel so self-conscious about my own body, like go and do it? Like, how do you not have the same weight around
Everyone knows.
Yeah.
Even to the point where like she'll be out with her mom in public and walk like steps behind or steps ahead so people can't tell they're together.
She doesn't want to be affiliated with the pregnant lady. Yeah, that was so extreme.
Well, I think the other like body related thing that we really liked in this book was the trip to the doctor's office. I think speaking of this idea of like portraying like a healthy relationship with your body and like especially like consent and boundaries in learning about your body, I think the doctor's visit does a really good job of showing like what you should expect, what kind of hinting at what wouldn't be appropriate, and doing it in a way that like kind of feels like an after school special, but you don't realize that you're like reading something so educational. Like it's entertaining still.
Yeah, it's not like the doctor says, I'm going to do this and then this and then this and then this. He's doing it while he's talking. So you get the sort of, he's doing the thing that Phyllis Reynolds Naylor is also doing in the book, right? So it's burying the stuff that needs to happen underneath this sort of veneer of like,
my kids
we're
play
going to distract
soccer.
you. Yeah. And I do think that that's a really important, you know, they depict the exam as having a chaperone in the room, which should always happen. I really liked seeing this in a book for a kid this age, because I think to me, it just brought up the whole scandal with Larry Nassar and the gymnast. If a girl knows, I should expect there to be a chaperone in the room. I should expect that I don't need a pelvic exam at 13 unless I am having like serious issues. I think setting like realistic and healthy expectations of what a patient-doctor relationship at that age should look like is really important. I also did like that the doctor was seeing her by herself. I mean, obviously she didn't have a parent there with her. She went with Lester, so he wouldn't have been in the room. But I think that giving kids the autonomy at that age to like know that I can talk to the doctor one-on-one about what's going on with me if it's something that I'm like uncomfortable to talk to my parents about. So like giving that outlet too, I thought was cool. And, you know, it accomplished a tick the box on the like, here are healthy boundaries, consent, issues with your body that maybe don't get talked about as much, because I do think things get lost.
And I mean, she's at the age where like most girls do stop seeing their pediatrician and go to like their first grown-up doctor. So it's good that this was kind of timed in that moment where you have that resource.
We talked a little bit before about how she accidentally ends up with a male doctor. Her dad had made the appointment with a woman for her, and her and Lester get their doctors swapped. And I thought it was really funny because the way that happens is Alice reads the doctor's last names,
Beverly.
genders the last names, and goes with a more feminine sounding last name who turns out to be a man.
And then Lester's upset that he ended up with the woman doctor,
Dr.
because he had his
Richards,
Mickey Mouse shorts.
No.
I think that's such a funny detail because I think that's another thing that's kind of dated. I don't think a guy today would be as like embarrassed about that, nor would they be wearing Mickey Mouse themed
No, I feel like they'd be out with it, but I guess it depends on their style. I feel like they'd wear it, but they wouldn't be as embarrassed. They wouldn't be embarrassed about it. But also, I guess, is it like
I think it'd just be a different cartoon
Yeah,
character.
Or
it was his boxers, because like he was also eating breakfast in those earlier. Yeah, I get it. Like, and especially because they sort of made it sound like the female doctor was young and attractive, and I think it was more related to like, well, crap, like, blew my chance with girl number 4.
And she's just like, actually, you know what? I'm gonna leave him with the woman doctor.
All right, so let's circle back to this states thing, because of all the things that stick out in my mind, the states were the thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I do want to say, I think I had like a, what is it called? A Mandela?
The Mandela effect.
Is that what it is? Mandala?
This is the Mandela effect in action.
Yes. Yeah, I can't even remember what it's called. But like that idea that like everyone thinks it was Berenstain Bears, but it's actually Berenstain Bears. And we all just like collectively misremembered. I was so confident and so certain that Alice was Wyoming. And I think it's because as a kid, I didn't think Wyoming was a real state. Like I had no concept of it as a place. It was just like an amorphous blob on the map because I lived in Pennsylvania and that was very far from Wyoming. So I think I was just like, that's the weird one. So that's the one I remember as being Alice. So it was like really shocking to me when that was not her assigned state in this book.
Yo, when they were naming all these states, I was just like, clearly I didn't pay enough attention to social studies because none of this has any meaning to me.
You didn't recognize the states?
Like, North Carolina, what's
I
that?
recognize obviously the names. Like, yeah, I know these names are states, but I'm just like, I didn't think of any like specific qualities. Like somebody called me Wyoming or North Carolina.
That was a weird thing because for North Carolina, why was their affiliation the swamp? That seems like very strange to me.
I think it's because he went there. It was Patrick again. I think he went there and he saw a swamp.
Like she wasn't aware that there were mountains in North Carolina, which was also very odd to me for somebody in Maryland, because it seemed very likely that you'd be aware, at least generally, that there are mountains that run through that part of the country.
I don't know. It's not the first thing I think of when I think of North Carolina. I think he said Outer Banks first, which
he did, which I think is a fair association. But then he went with
probably
swamp.
Wouldn't go swamp, or like it was like swamp or like dead something.
I think it was called. He said dismal swamp.
Dismal swamp.
So they basically just don't want the boys to think that they have flat chests,
right? Or I guess like wet chest.
Yeah, what does that even mean? They're like sunken in or something. My favorite thing about that was when she finally looks it up and she finds the mountains. I had it written down because it made me laugh out loud, that she was upset that they were the Bald Stone and Smoky Mountains. And she was like, what does that mean? Like she was like going to that level of detail about.
But that being said, you would rather have bald than like furry mountains. That was odd. I did think it was super funny. Whichever one of them, I think it was Pamela. It was like, if you got Louisiana, you just die.
Well, Rhode Island was the worst one
like
to her.
Louisiana was below sea level. So,
and then Delaware was another one they didn't want to get, which I thought was so funny because I have cousins from Delaware. My boyfriend's from Delaware, and I was just makes Delaware jokes. Like, what is there going on in Delaware? So that's what I thought about when they were like, yeah, I don't want to be Delaware either.
That felt very authentic Maryland to me.
That
to be
did.
like, not Delaware, anywhere but Delaware. Yeah, I did think it was really funny. I know that it's terrible, but I like laughed out loud when Pam's mom went out and bought her a Visit Wyoming t-shirt.
It's like, yo, you're having this conversation with your mom. Like, these kids have conversations with their parents that I probably never would have had, but it's also like, seems like it's like healthy conversation. But the getting the shirt was kind of weird.
Yeah, and her mom is
that
like,
was-
yes.
That felt like enabling harassment.
Yeah.
I don't think you should do that.
Yeah,
Probably not.
that was
I
a
prefer
weird choice.
Alice's dad's reaction when Alice is telling him that Pamela got named for Wyoming, and he just like drops his fork and puts his head in his hands, and he's like, "Dear God, Alex." That's the more appropriate parental reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is like, it does capture this kind of weird thing where like they both don't want to be given a state because ew, but also like if you don't get one, like there's only
That's
50
worse.
states and there's more than 50.
Mhm.
Well, although they did say, she said there's only 52 states, and I was like, what?
I completely missed that.
She did. Somebody's out there in Guam, apparently, or something. Like, what is happening?
And I was like, that's either really smart or really dumb. They just said that. But yeah, so she's like, there's only 52 states. There's more than 52 of us. And like, that would be I would die if I didn't get a state. Like, I'd rather be Illinois than nothing.
Yeah, you'd rather be made fun of than not even noticed, I
Right.
guess.
And just like, and then when she does get her, mountains, she's so proud of it. She's like, hates that she's proud of it, but then she's kind of proud of it too. It's like very
Yeah.
conflicting feelings.
Yeah, reading this as a kid, I definitely feel like I got some secondhand trauma from it, but also wanted to be part of it. Because it's complicated. You want the attention, you want the affirmation, but also like knowing that the boys in your life who are your peers feel that entitled to think that way about your body. I mean, yeah, we're all going through puberty. We're all thinking about this stuff, but it's a different level of entitlement to another person's physical existence.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely was like terrified of boys for a long time, and I think this was a part of it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely feel that because like I would even hate like going out in public or feeling like I was being stared at or like, having to get up in the middle of the class and like to go like sharpen my pencil. I didn't want to do things that I felt like would bring attention to me. So I actually really feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's just like my anxious little tween brain was exactly like Alice's, where I would read like 6 layers deep into every state assignment to the point that like I wouldn't even like the good ones. I'd be like, but it's not all mountains. And like, what if they're thinking about the plains in Wyoming or whatever? Yeah. Like, like I think I stressed about that more than like the fact that it's assigned to people. Like my brain is like, it went too many levels.
You got to find everything you can possibly can about the state to do the pros and the cons to figure out if this is good or not.
The last thing that we wanted to touch on and kind of the big denouement, I guess, of the book is this whole Denise Whitlock plotline, which...
What a downer. It's heavy. It's unexpected, too. The context for Denise is that their backstory is that she used to bully Alice, but they've sort of mended the fence and they've reached, I don't know, I guess a relationship where they're more or less comfortable with each other. So they interact, but they're not really friends. Like she's friends with like Pamela, for example. But Denise seems to be glomming onto her a little bit more over the course of the book. So like at school, she's talking to her, like she's finding her when they're walking after school and finding opportunities to just talk to her. And Alice is realizing like Denise is a pretty sad person. Like she's carrying a lot of trauma. She's dealing with a lot in her home life. And that comes out in the book. I think Alice describes her family, and Denise says that she's the last one of 6, I think. And her parents have told her they wish they would have stopped at 5, which is like shattering. So that's sort of the context we have for this family. Denise shows up at school with a shiner, and Alice is like, Denise, what happened to your eye? Who hit you? And she said, my mom. And she said, I kind of deserved it because I got mouthy with her. So, she belted me in the face. I think Alice realizes how commonplace that is to Denise. Like Denise doesn't even act like it's a thing, really. She just is kind of like yeah, that's what happens at my house. So Alice realizes this is just Denise's life. Like, it's so extraordinarily different from her home life. Denise also realizes that Alice's life is so extraordinarily different from her home life. And you see her trying to grab moments of that. You know, she's asking about Alice's family. She ends up coming over and staying for dinner. At one point, she's looking for reasons to sort of escape there to this softer family that is more what she would want. And a family without a mom, I think, is really important here because her mom is the abuser in her home. So she comes for dinner. Lester and her dad handled that really well. Like, they just did not make it a thing. And they were just kind of like, oh, Denise is here eating your gross food, Alice.
Poor Denise.
Yeah. And he makes her something else. And they're just incorporating her into the, you know, this very day-to-day life with them. She gets to stay overnight. Alice hears her sobbing in the middle of the night and doesn't say anything because she's sort of acknowledging, like, Denise is doing this at a time that she feels she has privacy and, like, I shouldn't intrude on that. Mm-hmm. Not very long later in the story, an assembly is called at school, and principal did this in a really bad way. Like, I don't think that that's the way that you would inform people of this, but informs everyone in the school that Denise killed herself by jumping in front of a train. Yeah. And when it hits that point in the book, like, it just comes out of nowhere. It packs a wallop. And then you see Alice break down and she's wondering if she should have done something differently. Should she have told somebody about what she knew about Denise's family? What if she had asked more questions? What if they had tried to get her to stay longer? Like, all of these things. Miss Summers tries to console her. And then she kind of just has to move on from it. Like, there's not a whole lot of space given to that in the book. Like, the buildup is much more than you actually get this resolution of it. And it doesn't tie it up in a neat bow. It's an interesting choice for the book because it really is the only particularly significant thing that happens in the book other than, like, I guess, the party.
I mean, hearing you describe that now, it makes me think about, like, this kind of running theme is, like, how we relate to the main woman figure in our lives. So you have, like, Elizabeth and her mom dynamic. You have Alice and the way that she is with, like, having no mom, and then Miss Summers, and then you have Denise's mom. And I think it was really driven home when Denise was describing that when her mom punched her, and Alice thinks to herself, like, oh, at the Whitlock house, the woman of the house uses her fist. Mm-hmm. That really, like, came home with me. The whole Denise plotline is written very, like, J chapter book in a way where it's, like, very quick and then it's kind of over. But it's not, like you said, it's not over. It's not like she's like, oh, this happened, now I moved on. She does sit with it and mourn it and have, like, kind of unresolved feelings, which I think is much different than most other books where it would just be like, oh, that was sad. Okay, well, now I'm doing this other thing. And I really respect that her feelings about Denise are so messy that she doesn't, same thing as with her mom. She doesn't say, like, oh, my mom was the greatest and I have so many warm memories of her. It's like, Denise was a person. She used to bully me. She had a terrible life. We were kind of coming around, but I still don't know that I was her friend. But this is really devastating that this happened and shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, she kind of comes to the conclusion, like, I was the only person that was kind to her.
Yeah.
And oof, yeah.
And I actually, I like that Alice was like, she never felt like it could possibly have been her fault in terms of I did something wrong. She just felt like there was more she could have done. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was coming because of the conversation we had when we scripted.
Sorry.
So there's the scene in the book where she's having the party for her dad and she comes with a gift and Alice is like, oh, you didn't have to bring my dad anything. And she's like, no, this is for you. And inside the gift is like a bracelet, a picture of her. And Alice doesn't think anything of it. She's like, yeah, sure thing. She ends up putting the picture up even before her passing. I thought that looking back, knowing that it was coming, it was kind of a giveaway. But if not, I just would have been like, oh, okay. Like, she really is kind of like growing to her and that likes that she has somebody in her life that is not treating her badly or she can come to and, you know, when she's not feeling okay. And towards the end of the book, like when they're putting together the time capsule, like I think the teacher makes a comment about somebody wanted to put like the newspaper of her death in the time capsule. And the teacher's like, no, because what kind of message is that sending to her if you're treating her better in death than in life? That was something that I thought was really profound to be in a children's book, but it absolutely makes sense. And I think it's a sentiment that a lot of people need to hear, not just children. And I like that he let her put the bracelet in the box, though, as a little bonus.
Yeah, because the bracelet represented who Denise was in life rather than how Denise died, which was what the article, or I guess, would have done. And he was trying to keep them from giving fame or notoriety or not promoting it, but oh, this is why she was important. Yeah, I also thought that was a really interesting take on it for a children's book, along with they didn't build her into like, she was the sweetest person and this is so tragic. It was like, she wasn't the sweetest person and it is still tragic.
Yeah.
And I think with Alice having that sort of constant undercurrent of grief about her mom, it doesn't just end it for her. Like, you assume that she is going to keep thinking about Denise down the road and that it'll be this different experience of grief. She is going to have those intrusive thoughts, just like she does with her mom, where sometimes you're just going about your day and now you remember this person is gone. So again, I think she does a really nice job of showing what grief really looks like rather than showing this very romanticized version of grief that we often get in children's literature.
You know, how you mentioned that Alice has this conflict where she's like, oh, I could have done more. Like, why didn't I do anything? And obviously, like, she's 12. She can't be expected to have done anything about it. But I think it subtly does the thing of teaching kids, like, here are some warning signs. Like, if you see your friend dealing with this kind of stuff, if you see someone is struggling, if you see that they're giving away all their stuff, tell an adult about it.
And I like that the friends had that conversation with each other, because I don't know if that's a conversation that I would have had with my friends at that age, but I guess also because they actually experienced something like that, it was hard for them to not talk about it, especially being that they're so close.
Right.
I don't know if this is just me overthinking it, but I don't know if y'all noticed how they were talking through some of the things like, okay, well, look out for this, look out for this. Some of the stuff was just stuff that like Alice was just kind of just doing. Like, there was that one time where she just like randomly bursted out crying because she was thinking about her brother and if something tragic happened to him. And I'm just like,
but they said, but we all cry all the time. So
don't
use that as a warning sign.
Yeah. So they were like, it's not a warning sign, but I was just like, okay.
That scene was really funny where she is like, talks herself into thinking that her brother died in like a car accident.
To think about him dying to be able to tolerate him, but then she just makes herself sad. Yeah, I thought that was a great
She's like,
scene.
yeah, this is how we could achieve world peace if everybody just acted like everybody was going to die soon.
They have to like escort her out of the cafeteria.
And the nurse handled it like in a really funny way too. She's like, oh no, are you okay? Like really trying to take care of her. And she's like, well, he's not actually dead. I was just, she's like, oh boy.
In the span of like 5 minutes, the whole school had heard. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was where I read it. It was like, how do you come back from that? Because that's embarrassing.
That's
like,
embarrassing.
That's a real weird thing to do, Alice.
Patrick is like, I heard you had a freak out in the cafeteria.
That's a true friend, because everybody else just talked around her.
Yeah.
He's just like, well, I heard you was out here tripping.
Oh my gosh.
Each episode, our luminous literarian and frequent co-host Hawa will provide miscellany and insights from our book. It's time for Hawa's Headspace.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hawa's Headspace, the part of the podcast where I literally say whatever comes to mind. For today's segment, I was thinking a lot about how in Alice and April, the boys assigned states as nicknames to each girl depending on how developed they are. Depending on which state they were assigned, the girls were either excited or disappointed. I took to the street to ask a few people what comes to mind when they think of the good old state of Maryland. What are 3 things that come to mind when you think of the state of Maryland?
The Ravens, crabs, and UMD.
Old Bay, blue crabs, and the obsession with the state flag.
What are 3 things that come to mind when you think of the state of Maryland?
The flag, crabs, Chesapeake Bay.
3 things that come to mind when I think of the state of Maryland are crabs, Maryland crabs, the University of Maryland Terps, and the Bay Bridge.
Well, folks, there you have it. That's what people think about when they think of Maryland. Based on those responses, what would your reaction be to getting Maryland as your assigned nickname? Tune in next time to see what else is going on in this head of mine.
Now let's talk to someone who actually knows something about Wyoming. Former Wyoming state legislator Charles Pelkey.
Why do you think it is that Wyoming is a forgotten state for a lot of people?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of reasons. To start, we're about the same size as Colorado, and we have a tenth of the population. So we are wide open spaces in Wyoming. I mean, I think our biggest city is only 60,000. I mean, it's a beautiful state. I mean, we have Yellowstone, we have Devil's Tower, but it's a very difficult place to live particularly if you're not comfortable in cold weather. I'll tell you a quick story. I took my daughter to Iceland in the middle of winter 5 years ago. We were 20 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, and I went down to have a drink before I went to bed. Started talking to this guy, and he goes, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "Well, originally I'm from Germany, but I live in Wyoming now." And he goes, "Where?" I said, "Laramie." He goes, "Well, what's that like?" And I said, "Well, we're at 2,300 meters in height. We're between two mountain ranges in a big valley." He said, "Well, that sounds nice. What's the weather like?" And I said, "The summers here are spectacular." He goes, "Yeah, but what's weather like right now?" And it was December 7th or something like that. Wanted to pull up my weather bug, and sure enough, we had 18 inches of snow. The wind was blowing at 35 miles an hour. The temperature was 18 below zero Fahrenheit. And he looks at me and goes, "Holy, how do you people live like that?" Keep in mind, I'm 20 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. And, I mean, it's really rough here in the winter.
Yeah, that sounds brutal.
Yeah. I mean, Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, has never had a temperature lower than 6 below zero Fahrenheit. And the record cold for Laramie is 50 below zero.
So I also wanted to ask you about the people in Wyoming. You represented people in Wyoming as a politician. Right. How would you characterize people in Wyoming?
Well, it's changing. It used to be that we had a solid Democratic South, but and the Republicans here were the sort of leave me the hell alone Republicans, not really trying to do a lot of social stuff, just sort of being left alone. We've had an infusion of really far right, kind of like Idaho. We've had an infusion of really far right politicians. So one of my friends in the legislature, a Democrat by the name of Stan Blake, was replaced by a guy he lost to a guy with Nazi tattoos on his forehead.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. So I don't know. We've got Wyoming politics is an interesting mix. Not sure how to characterize the state, but it is growing increasingly not just conservative, but quite right-wing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there are any misconceptions or stereotypes that people have about Wyoming or the people who live there that you would like to dispel?
Well, I mean, it's a fundamentally decent state. There are really a lot of good people here. We're not all cowboys. We're, it's an energy state. Stereotypical. They think of us as cowboys and backward. It's definitely not the case. I mean, it's a fairly decent, hard-working state. Oh, the other thing about Wyoming that you ought to keep in mind also is we're like the fourth most successful K through 12 school system in the country. And we're number one west of the Mississippi. I mean, it's like we got a ton of money from the coal industry, because they produce a ton of coal. And I did talk about the carbon problem, but in terms of education, we have a spectacular K through 12 system and a very well-funded university as well. So those things, we're not up to what New Mexico just did, but we do have a thing called the Hathaway Scholarship, which makes undergraduate and community college almost free. It's really good. Take Colorado and compare it to Wyoming on K through 12 education. Our teachers are paid better. Our schools are newer and better. It's absolutely wonderful here for that. So, we got a ton of money and very few people.
Okay, and then my last question would be, if someone was to visit Wyoming, what would the top of their list need to be for things to do in Wyoming?
Well, everybody wants to go to Yellowstone. Everybody wants to go out, pet a buffalo, and 10 or 15 of them a year get gored. The Wind River Range, Lander, Wyoming is a really nice place. Devil's Tower, first national monument in the U.S. We have the first national park in Yellowstone. It's a gorgeous state. We have the largest migratory paths for wildlife in the country. We have the most isolated spots in the lower 48. It's quiet. And, if you go out at night and look at the stars, you can see the Milky Way in a way that no one in New York City has ever seen. So, it's spectacular. Laramie is different, though. It's a college town. I used to refer to my house district as an island of blue and a sea of red.
Mm-hmm.
Laramie's really cool. People in Laramie refer to each other as Laramigos. We have terrific restaurants, great coffee shops. I actually feel good for the young woman who is named Wyoming.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, Charles.
Sure, no worries.
Okay, so each week we play a game. This week we are going to bite off a game provided to us by the lovely people of that really old Bantam edition that Kelsey and I read from about Alice. So at the end of all the Alice books published by Bantam Doubleday, there is a short checkbox quiz that's sort of the teaser for the next Alice book, but we realize they're all the same questions. So we're going to play the quiz that we would have played when we were girls if we had these editions of the book. You know how it feels. These days, that's all Alice is suffering. Instead of growing up, she seems to be growing backward, and this is titled Embarrassment. It says, have you ever, and then we have yes or no checkboxes, opened a dressing room door on a boy or done something equally embarrassing? So
too vague.
I agree, but yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes.
Are we answering as Alice or ourselves?
As you.
All right, now everyone tell their story. I'm just kidding.
Has anyone actually opened a dressing room door on a boy?
Not a dressing room, but
no,
I have
bathrooms for sure.
Yeah, I have brothers.
Have you ever been the one who gets the totally uncool teacher?
Yes.
Heck yeah.
I was homeschooled, so yes.
Wow.
I love you, Mom.
Sorry, Teresa's mom.
I had a 5th grade teacher, and something happened, and I was crying one day or something, and the next day, something happened, and I got upset, but I wasn't on the verge of crying. She was like, ugh, not you again with them crocodile tears. So Miss from Spring Hill Lake Elementary, I ain't forget about you. She don't work there no more. It's fine.
Bleep that.
Have you ever had a disastrous Valentine's Day?
No.
I don't think horribly disastrous.
I would say not disastrous, but there was so my first ever Valentine's Day that I spent with someone. I was 18 years old, and I told my mom I was going to work, and she dropped me off at the mall, and I was in my uniform and everything, and I changed to whatever I was going to wear. The guy I was dating was friends with my twin sister's boyfriend, so when she was away at college at the time, so he was there, and he gave her a ride to go see. He gave the dude a ride to go see my sister, so we kind of had to make our plans to be around there, which was 30 minutes out. Yeah, I think we ended up going to an IHOP or a Denny's or something on Valentine's Day, because everywhere else we wanted to go was super crowded, and of course we didn't think to plan ahead. And then of course my mom thought I was at work, so my flowers that I had in my vase had water in them, and I put them in my tote bag, and silly me forgetting that there's water in this bag, and it spills all over my stuff in the bag. So that was kind of disastrous. Mom, if you hear this, which I hope you don't, I don't be lying like that anymore, okay?
Okay, last question. Have you ever not known you have a terrible stain on your shirt?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
All the time.
honestly, on any given day, that's me.
Right.
So,
Literally all the time.
the end says, all of these embarrassing events have happened to Alice.
Shocker.
No. If you've missed any of them, now's the time to catch up. And then it says read, and then it has all of the like Alice books that you can read.
What a cop out.
It really was.
Yeah.
No, stains are not even embarrassing.
I was about to say, I remember she was embarrassed about the hole in her pants, but that's not a
Yeah,
stain. Like,
not
that's
the
a
same
stain. I feel like a
level
hole in the pants is more
at
actually
all.
embarrassing.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Stains nothing. I went to church with a thong stuck to me. Oh, that was the worst. When one of my kids was like an infant, like I was so tired and sleep deprived, y'all. So I had like blearily done the laundry and stuff. I was like, I'm gonna get myself to church. I'm gonna go to mass. So I go to mass and it was winter, right? So I'm wearing my North Face, my Denali jacket, which is fleece. So of course, static. I get all the way through mass. There are people sitting behind me. And then I realize that all through mass, one of my lace thongs has been stuck to the back of my North Face jacket, and nobody has told me. So I sat there all mass like that. And then those women are not my friends anymore because you need to tell somebody that.
Like, why would you not?
Right.
Like, that's not something that you see someone do and think, oh, I did this intentionally.
That's not like, oh, you have a little food stuck in your teeth.
Right.
Like,
Right.
That's you tell.
Each episode, we ask whether our book passes the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test asks whether a work features two female characters who talk to each other, and they have to talk about something that doesn't involve men or boys. So how did we do with Alice?
Yes.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. That was
And
easy.
That is surprising given that
There's
literally
a lot
her-
of focus on boys.
there's a lot of men in her life and in the plot.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool.
But they talk about a lot of things.
Yeah.
They talk
Actually-
about duct
sorry.
cleaning.
I have a great little anecdote from the blog that Phyllis Reynolds Naylor keeps. She tells a story about a book signing where three boys around 11 or 12 came in line to have their Alice book signs, and they told her, "We learn about girls this way."
That's awesome.
I love that.
So I appreciate that we have a book that passes the Bechdel test for those boys to learn about girls.
That was cute. Well, that's it for this episode of These Books Made Me. Join us next time when we'll discuss a book where children rob the Met Museum of all its pennies. If you think you know which book we're tackling next, drop us a tweet. We're at PGCMLS on Twitter and hashtag These Books Made Me.